Hey everybody, Cinis here with a run I'm very excited to share with you. It's an all-clans world record that not only beats the 50-minute barrier, but absolutely shatters it with a time of 47:39. And all of the runs were pretty much excellent, the Melting Remnant one especially, so much so that it actually sets a world record of its own. There is one problem, and that is I started recording accidentally after, not before, the Hellhorn run. So here's the seed on screen. It has a score of 43,035 and a time of 6:17. To verify my run, I have this second screenshot, which shows that that run starts a string of 5, and then you can verify the scores if you have any more doubt with the runs in the video, because the score will show up. If you don't believe that, that's fine, because this run still gets an undisputed world record in the Melting Remnant run. So, with that, let's get into things. The Hellhorn run wasn't really very interesting, so it's fine that that's the particular run that I did not show you. It's just a standard 2 Inferno strats with a lot of spell weakness. I got pretty lucky, but you can see that the score is the same as in my screenshot. Then we're moving on to Melting Remnant and Umbra. The resetting takes a little while for this one, but it's well worth the wait. So for Melting Remnant, I hunt for a Burnout extension and or Reform. Here's a Wicked Blaze, which I normally like to take, but I don't get Burnout Flicker. The other strat I've seen used is by Never Nathaniel and focuses on Crushing Demise. I choose to avoid that one because I think the Reform boxes are too slow and that this strategy has a lot more upside, and I think the time I achieve with it in this video will show you exactly how fast it is. But first you've got to sit through a bunch of resetting. I consider this run, and then decide, no, that's dumb, just because there wasn't really enough there. And if I reset for another 30 seconds or so to get a faster run, as I end up doing, more power to me. So here's the run I take. It has Subsuming Blade and Purifying Cleanse, so that's its Burnout extension. Always take the first trial. Either the coins are helpful for spell upgrades and purges, or the unit upgrade can give you Paraffin Enforcer or Lady of the Reform, which are the two main units you want for this run. First fight, pretty trivial. Apparently the footage is lagging, which I did not notice while first watching through this, but it's hopefully still pretty watchable. Everything is fairly clear as to what's going on. Purifying Cleanse puts Flicker into range of killing the boss. I take a Wicklash as an offensive scaling component and for extra burnout. Pretty much standard stuff so far. Always take the Remnant banner, and it offers both the units I want. Paraffin Enforcer is by far the highest priority. It does pretty much everything you want in a single card. Reduce the cost of Subsuming Blade in case it gets holdover, which it doesn't. It's still good to have, though, just to make sure you can always play it. And then just start the Great Purge, which is important in anything other than Seraph the Diligent. Fight 2, I'm once again taking the trial. Retribution isn't too big of a deal for a Flicker with a 50 base health pool this early. Paraffin Enforcer helps clear backlines and boost Flicker's attack, which is always pretty strong. Subsume this just for extra damage, and then Relentless is pretty easy. So then I take another Purifying Cleanse. It's a 0-cost Burnout extension. What more do I need to say? And then I'm looking for unit upgrades for Paraffin Enforcer. Specifically, I'm looking for Multi-Strike, and luckily for me, it's right there. And then I opt for Strength Stone to give it a little bit of more offensive staying power through the later floors. In case I pull a lack of offensive scaling cards, it does a decent job of clearing backlines on its own, especially with this 25x2. Here's Explosive Sigil Daedalus, the second most scary of the variants. Double Barrel is by far the scariest in most runs. In this run, things wouldn't be too scary if I didn't not draw any of my Purifying Cleanses in the first two hands. Here are all three of them in hand number 3. So we are safe, but it was a close run thing, especially if I hadn't chump blocked with the dregs. But now I'm pretty much in the driver's seat here. I've got more of my Purifying Cleanses coming up. I can subsume this bomb, and I've got a pretty clear advantage over Daedalus. With that, I'm looking for Furnace Tap, and I find it immediately. No unit is particularly appealing, especially not compared to being able to dupe Paraffin Enforcer, which is guaranteed next floor, as you will always see a dupe in either Ring 3 or Ring 4. Here's a Ring 4 dupe that gets me another Paraffin Enforcer with both upgrades. Which is absolutely lovely, and now my offensive core is pretty clear. Flicker, 2 Paraffin Enforcers, and Furnace Tap. Pretty strong. And also very low on card plays, which makes it one of the fastest cores you can get. You'll see exactly how fast it is here, because the only things I really need to play are a couple of zero-cost Purifying Cleanses. I choose to subsume Steward, but you'll see me get away from that as the run goes on, just because it becomes more or less unnecessary. So Flicker's now have a multi-strike 1, and is able to make Mincemeat of Thoughtbinder in 2 phases, which is a pretty fast Relentless for this strat. And now I know I don't need anything else. So with that, I'm moving on. Next order of business is to get upgrades on Furnace Tap so I can duplicate it. So the normal plan is 2 Ember Stones, but sometimes I'll take double stack, and this is one of those times, because I don't have too much other Ember Drain cards, so the potential is there that I can play a second Furnace Tap if I duplicate it, and give Flicker Multi-Strike 5, enough to absolutely stomp anything in its path. Not that Multi-Strike 3 isn't already, but 5 just kind of takes it up to 11. The Wicklash becomes especially strong here because the Multi-Strike helps it scale even better than it already does, and the Paraffin Enforcers, for the same reason, get a huge buff from the Furnace Tap. You can see how simple to play relative to certain other strategies this one is. And in just a couple of phases, Sower of Sorrows is obliterated, and you'll sense a theme throughout the rest of this run. That's just kind of how this goes. It's a very lucky run, yes. You'll notice I got a bit excited and split early. I think this is actually because my end turn and split buttons are very close to each other on my mouse. But it's not the end of the world because the timer's still running. You can see when I should actually split the Melting Remnant. And I believe my gold split is something in the 19 or 18 minute range before this. That's about to get blown away. Eternal Crest is the safest fell, at least in my opinion. And so I'm glad to see it here. One disadvantage to Furnace Tap being played early is that I'm now dealing with only 1 Paraffin Enforcer, but with the extra multi-strike, that's obviously not a problem. I'm already landing pretty substantial damage on Fell. Purifying Cleanse is essentially the only card I play other than Wicklash for the rest of this run, and it feels bad to not be able to play the other Furnace Tap or the Paraffin Enforcer, but they are pretty much inconsequential, as you can see. Fell gets wiped off the map, and another Furnace Tap could be taken here, but no. It's hard enough playing 2 Furnace Taps. 3, especially one that's not double stacked, is simply not worth it. Removal is the main thing here, trying to get 2 Furnace Taps in the same hand is really the most important part of this run's progression from here on out. Being able to get Multi-Strike 5 right out of the gate, or get both Paraffin Enforcers and a Furnace Tap would be huge. Still RNG dependent though. Here I'm going to get both Paraffin Enforcers, except I make a mistake and play a Drain. That's really all there is to say about this one. This could have gone a lot better and a lot smoother, and it still went okay, don't get me wrong. But that Paraffin Enforcer is taking up a deck slot, and it's just not ideal. I've clearly got the offensive oomph, but in the fight with Pyrewings, which give you Ember Drain stacks, it's a little tough to be able to play out Paraffin Enforcer again, but it's okay. Obviously, it worked just fine. Skip everything, and we're all the way onto Seraph already. And you can see we're 4 minutes ahead at the moment, although obviously we've still got a fight to go. The dupe does it really go on anything, but Whiplash is the right play. With the Multi-Strike 5 scaling, it was a good choice to have that extra attack bonus. Furnace Tap could have been duped, but playing 2 of them is hard enough. As I said earlier, playing 3 would be even harder. So I get 1 Paraffin Enforcer and 2 Furnace Taps at the start, and I'm already dealing 400 damage to Seraph. Clearly things are going pretty well. I'm using Dreg's Chump Block just to ease the burden on my Purifying Cleanse spam, and also to get them out of my deck without having to scroll. Just kind of a win-win-win there. And again, I've got Ember Drain to the point where I'm not going to be able to play a Paraffin Enforcer, and I know that. Ditto the Train Steward that's just still vibing in my deck. But the offensive power on this Flicker and the healing from Purifying Cleanse is easily enough to deal with Relentless. In a mere 2 phases. So that's Melting Remnant done, and I should have split at 16:29, a good 2 or 3 minutes ahead of my split, and a quick pause reveals 8 minutes and 34 seconds of in-game time. So that's the Melting Remnant Unseeded world record. So would literally any other run, to be fair, considering no submissions have been uploaded to speedrun.com, but that was a particularly solid one, and one I think will stand for a decent while, at least. Moving on to Umbra, I'm rerolling for Void Bindings and Monstrous Penumbra. And as soon as I see that, the run can begin. You take any Seraph type, even Seraph the Chaste, which is a little scary because Void Binding is a card that does nothing but buffs. Diligent is also okay. I opt for Forever Flame, which would allow me to play units out for free during Ember Drain. It's not a huge buff, but it's still somewhat important, so I don't mind taking it. Here's fight 1. With the free Train Stewards, I can play them out, no problem. It's not even necessary just because it's fight 1, but it can be done. That's just a misplay, no need for a morsel. Then another Void Binding, and we wipe out Mustache Man. Take Perils of Production in the Consume Seraph fight. That is a lifesaver of a card. It'll allow me to safely consume out the Perils itself, and then also get energy to consume out other cards. Holdover and 0 cost is pretty much the dream for Void Binding in this run, so I'm very happy to see it. And that allows me to set up here, use a Drag to Chump Block because there isn't much reason not to. Perils of Production. Again, it's just kind of a play the Ember Drain card sort of deal. Penumbra doesn't quite do the job here, but a Void Binding Train Steward is enough. And that's fight 2. Another Perils would have been wise there, but I just didn't take it. No excuses for that one. I dupe the Void Binding because that's the only thing you care about in this run, and then I check the Caverns for the 5 dupe event, which does not show its face. That is a 1 in 8 chance to do so, and then it just ends the run immediately, in a good way. The rest of it just becomes trivial. So this is, I think it's Double Barrel, which is one of the scarier ones. Explosive Sigil is by far scarier in this run because Penumbra relies on Damage Shield, and all the 1 damage from kills clear it easily. Thankfully, I've got both my Void Bindings drawn relatively early, and so I'm fairly confident that I have enough to deal with Relentless. And that confidence turns out to be correct. We mop the floor and look for Furnace Tap, don't find it, and move on. I take Capacity immediately here so I don't screw it up later in the run. And then I'm looking to Purge to get more reliable draws on the Void Bindings. Making if a morsel is too expensive and too slow, so it's the obvious first choice for Purge. I grab Monstrous 2 and move on. Fight 4 can have some annoying things like blights in it, but this particular one is not too bad. I think it's the weakest in terms of total health. And that's mostly what you care about in a Void Binding run. Drawing one Void Binding early is enough to keep Penumbra in pretty good shape, and then here's the second one. Doesn't quite deal all the damage it needs to, but it's better than other fights, and it's still perfectly fine. Relentless takes care of the boss in 3 phases. So now this is a dupe Void Binding run, and I'll take removal as well. Refracting lenses might have been safe, and I take improved firebox in case I get some X-cost cards. And you'll see this is actually helpful, believe it or not. I choose to purge Train Stewards over Shade Splitters there, so I can use the Shade Splitters as 0-cost consume fodder if I can Emberstone them later. That's a bit of a, like, quote-unquote 4D chess play. Also, this is a mistake. It's a pretty big mistake, and I think you can see why it's a mistake. So I believe this is a fight I have to reset, because I can't do anything to those enemies. And I think this fight also features Crystal Cloak, which is a pain in this particular run. No, it's Harpy, who is also a pain in this run because he removes... I forget what the Harpy's gender is. But the Harpy removes 5 damage shield per strike instead of 1. So I have to set up a little higher, allowing me a bit more safety when it comes to Relentless. Other than that, this fight is the same. I also had the advantage of using Dregs to chump block, which I could have done in the previous run, but didn't. So Harpy, in particular, is a little bit of a dicey one, especially with a relatively weak setup in terms of Void Bindings. So I'm still a bit worried about whether or not I survive. And as it turns out, I'm in trouble. I can't reach the backline, so they're dealing damage, but I do have a trick up my sleeve. 2 Void Bindings and Perils bring Harpy just low enough, and it is very close, that I survive on 20 health. That terrified me in the moment, but thankfully we're good to go. No need to reset the fight again or to stop the run, which is good, because this run's, other than that particular scare, going pretty darn well. Dupe another Void Binding, because that is the #1 priority, and then moving on to Wrathcrest Fell, who can be a little scary because I'm only on 40 Pyre health, and if I get really bad rage patterns, or a particularly bad early draw, I can be in big trouble, and this is the start of it. If Fell went for a triple rage on that particular set of units, I believe I would have died here. But instead she only goes for a double, and I hang on. With 1, count it, 1 Pyre health. So I have to kill everything flawlessly in order to win, but it does look like I'm in shape to do that with enough Void Bindings and Perils to scale offensively. So after those 2 absolute nail-biters, Relentless is here, and it's easy. 1, 2, 3, dead. Was again looking for Furnace Tap just to nail down my offensive power, but didn't happen. That's okay. I take Draw because I don't need capacity anymore, and I should prioritize the removal, but I instead go to Emergent of Magic and Concealed Caverns. And here's a card that is, for once in its entire life, actually really clutch in speedruns. For, again, not normal. So Awoken's Rail Spike used to be the bane of a speedrunner's existence, because it's effective, but it's incredibly slow. But it's actually going to carry me for just a moment here. Because my deck is so thin, and because I have improved Firebox, I can turn a first turn draw of the Rail Spike into a full draw of my entire deck, getting all of the holdover cards first turn. And I believe this fight goes in that way. Yep, so here's the first turn Railspike. I play a couple cards out so I can draw to my full size, and then Awoken Railspike pulls everything, including a Void Binding redraw, and now we're set. No need to worry about much of anything here. And it's a simple mash. Just press, I think it's 4 every time. Except for adding perils. This fight can be scary, but wasn't. And with that, we're moving on to Seraph, who is Consume Seraph, and I do have a relatively small number of Void Bindings. So this still is a little scary, especially with only 31 Pyre health, but I get pretty much the exact set of upgrades I would want. And I go for a holdover on a 0-cost Drip Fall to prevent any runaway Lightwings from attacking the Pyre. So that's pretty much my plan going into this. But the actual micro matters a lot, and I'm again lucky enough to draw Awoken Railspike on open, which means I can do this. And that means because all 3 of the Vengeful Shards are now 0 cost, I can safely play them out even under Ember Drain and without perils. So now I'm feeling a little more confident, but my spell draws end up particularly bad, and I have to already consume out 1 Void Binding. And then Perils of Production. And things are looking a little dicey here. Only 31 Pyre health going into the double tank wave. And I have to consume out another Void Binding, but thankfully I have enough attack to do that. And my Drip Fall comes in clutch. And dazes that Lightwings, bringing him down to the floor where I can kill him. Down to 2 Void Bindings, play out the Vengeful Shards. Down to 1 Void Binding, but I instead consume out Drip Fall to save 1 damage shield. And as I consume out my last Void Binding, you can see that I end up being fine. Still, a bit of a nail-biter for most of the run, and one I'm very glad I made it out of alive. So with that, we're 2 minutes ahead of world record, going into the 2 more consistent runs in Stygian and Awoken. And because they're so consistent, I go into single clan mode, basically, where I ignore everything I think I can safely just get rid of. Stygian and Awoken, Covenant 0, and away we go. First Seraph is Chased. We're looking for Temperament and Frostbite. Here's Temperament. And there's Frostbite. Thankfully a pretty quick run there. And then I should have taken Infuse Mallet, but I chose to skip. And it's not the end of the world that I didn't take it. It's helpful mainly in the Seraph fight to clear Shade Wings from killing your tank early. So I know from playing this fight quite a bit that I can be pretty stingy with the amount of cards I play. Having a Steward or 2 in front of Tethys is more than enough to deal with the boss. Except when it's not, because there's an Archer in the back. But this still does the job after a single Frozen Lance. None of those are useful, but Wildwood Sap is absolutely what you want. So now I'm mainly in the market for a tank, and so I take the Awoken banner and get the archetypal tank, Thorn Hollow. Looking for a bit more initial health for the Seraph fight, and I get it in the form of Large Stone and Heartstone, and this will also reduce the relative need for regen during Relentless because of the high base health. That means things will go faster because I have to play less cards, basically. So here I completely ignore the spikes, or almost completely ignore the spikes, because I know it'll be safe to clear out the boss with just Thorn Hollow. Titan's Tooth is takeable, but it's far from mandatory. Then I take spell upgrades. I can't take a Stygian unit because I would have to take double capacity in order to play it, Thorn Hollow, and Tethys all on the same floor, which is simply too much investment. And I know because I have a Rejuvenator unit, I can go for a Pure Restore strategy, which ends up being what I take. Here is a weird one. Normally I like to see this event, but it's a bit wacky here. I take a single extra Wildwood Sap for mid-range fights, while I still have Frozen Lances in the deck, and as things get a little more threatening to my base health pool, basically. So I have to play Stewards out on other floors because this does not fit. But it doesn't really need to. I've got the healing and the spikes necessary to clear out much of this floor. Especially because I'm on Covenant 0. It's definitely the coward's way to play, but it's a speedrun. Cowardice is not the name of the game, but it helps. With a bunch of spikes and regen, it's clear this Relentless is a wash. Daedalus is dead. I take Spike of the Stygian as another defensive tool and as a way of hitting Frostbite onto a flying boss so that I can potentially use Hoarfrost Effigy on it. Dupe and remove is the obvious choice. I can't take any units, including Trained Steward, so I purge them out. The dupe goes to 0 cost restore, because I'm planning on nothing but restores in my hand, and it's a 6-card hand, and I'll eventually take 4 energy. So in sum, basically, that means I need 2 0-cost restores to play out everything. Offensive scaling is a little bit lacking early in fights, as you can see. But it's not too bad. Especially once I get my spikes up, things are looking okay. So with my standard old restore spam, we're pretty much good to go. Obviously the boss can't break through this, even with its little helpers in the back line. And I spike it just for good measure. Looking for Hoarfrost Effigy, so I will check Stygian packs from here to Seraph. But Awoken, I've gotten what I need from. And what I need from Awoken is mostly just restores. So we're only 3 cards away from the deck archetype I'm looking for. It's much the same as the Reju Sentient strat. Probably could have purged here again, but I instead choose to take double stack on the spike, which is also plenty helpful. Again, Thorn Hollow, Tethys. Spam restores to get some early spikes. Spam regen to avoid this damage, and Steve, the Clipped Guardian in the back there, is actually dead. Which is quite rare, and is only happening because we're playing on Covenant 0 at the moment. This guy, however, does not die, because of the way things are ordered. Normally the reverse is true, and I get to double stack Spike Harpy, which, after him giving me a very close shave in the Umbra run, is very satisfying. Crystalline Seeds could have been taken there, but it by no means had to be. Artifact is Sigilled Seaweed, which is especially nice going into the Scourgefell fight. And I could have taken another Spike of the Stygian, but you'll see I have more than enough of those already. So Scourgefell is very good when combined with Sigilled Seaweed, and only when combined with Sigilled Seaweed, because half of the Absolvers in the fight will no longer provide blights. Especially the crucial first floor Absolver does not. So I can get away with not giving any first turn spikes to my Thorn Hollow, because even if he escapes, he will not harm me too much. Spike Fell for residual damage, and then I'm just going to play out those because I'm pretty safe here. No sweepers, nothing too fancy. Again, it's much as the Restore strat coming up after this. Just spam heals, that's it. Obviously the payoff is slightly different, but it works just as well. And I can safely play out the ultimate penances because of my 0-cost restores. And then obviously Fell is toast. Looking for Effigy, still don't find it, which is pretty lame, but oh well. I take another draw. This probably should have been energy, but it's not the end of the world. And I can actually fix it, although I think I choose not to. Yeah, I indeed choose not to. Duping the 0-cost restore once again would have done the job. But I was looking for an artifact by the name of Cuddlebeard to increase my Frostbite potency. Didn't find it, but the odds aren't that bad, so it's not a horrible decision. Here's the Pyre Wings, which is by far, I think, yeah, I would say by far the worst of the options in this, because it both Ember Drains me to make sure I can't play as many healing cards, and it attacks Tethys in the back. It's an unfortunate combination, but zero-cost restores can get around it. And I also have Sigiled Seaweed to mitigate the triggered effect of the Pyre Wings. So only half the time that one there did not do Ember Drain. Only half the time do they Ember Drain me at all. With enough regen, and especially with the spike, we're good to go here. I can take another spike of the Stygian and do, again, Awoken needs no skipping, and I would always love to see Hoarfrost Effigy here, but it doesn't always happen, and this is a run where it's okay that it didn't. So saving some effigies for next time, I guess. All the Frozen Lances are gone, zero cost restore does not get a dupe here, actually. And I'm looking for Cuddlebeard, which I don't see. I do see Rules of Containment, which isn't really that good, but I wanted to take something, and so I did. Here, Seraph. Thorn Hollow is by far the strongest tank for this particular one, and having Sigiled Seaweed in this fight is very nice. As soon as I get up to 5 spikes, which I do turn 1, the Shade Wings damage output is cut in half, and considering how scary those things are, I'm very glad to see that. So, although I have all these spikes, I'm going to lean towards not using them to ensure Thorn Hollow has enough regen to do the job in Relentless, rather than getting greedy. So with that in tow, I just kind of go along with it. Thankfully, Tethys has enough attack to not get sat down throughout the course of the fight, so she can still deliver her Frostbite. I choose to spike Seraph here with my extra energy. Pretty standard stuff, and then Calamity strikes by me sapping my Thorned Hollow and giving it a bunch of Frostbite, which looks like it's going to spell disaster until it doesn't, by making sure my Hollow doesn't die on the opening strike. Then the regen kicks in, and then we're good to go. Another gold split on the left there. Also, let me know how this live split position is treating you in the comments. I believe this is my first run with this new live split setup, and it's more helpful for me because I can see my artifacts, money, pyre health, and all that jazz without having to move it. It is a little bit smaller, obviously, but I'm not sure if that's a particularly bad thing from your perspective. So now on to Awoken, and again I'm in single clan mode, just like nothing but purge, nothing but restore. Although I had died to a very unfortunate series of events on my previous All Clans run, 48 minutes into what would have been a 50-minute run, but that actually turned out okay, as you see by the time in the title. Priory's Cloak is a very strong artifact that allows me to cut down on certain rejuvenate triggers against weak health units. You'll see that come into play, and I think I'll try to point out a couple instances where it happens. Priory's Cloak only works when you're damaged. It works on the amount that's actually healed. So it won't always be as effective as it might seem, but sometimes, like here for example, it will chunk out damage. None of those, although Restoration Detonation is takeable, in combination with Priory's Cloak, it is just worse. Because Cloak already does its job, looking for a backliner. Deranged Brute is kind of a meh quality backliner, and I don't get good upgrades on it either. So, not very impressive here, although I've still got a slot to get it like multi-strike or quick or whatever. But any backliner will do, honestly. The main issue is, does it have attack? And Deranged Brute definitely does. He also has one of the best googly eye placements, I think, in the Hellhorn kit. Not that that's really related, but it's fun to look at. Sharpen could have been taken here, but didn't have to be. Having the spikes in combination with regen's never a bad thing, just because it reduces the number of procs you need to deal. But this also works fine. Should have probably been unit upgrades here, because I don't really have a good thing to use the dupe on. as evidenced by the fact that I just don't use the dupe. And getting multi-strike or even opening rage on that deranged brute would have made it a lot stronger. Here's a place where you'll see the power of Priory's Cloak, aka Awoken Flex Tape. That one rejuve proc killed 2 clergymen, and because of Explosive Sigil, it'll do it again. It's not, like, game-breakingly strong by any means, but it's pretty effective. And you can see that I'm lacking purges, because my restore density is very, very low. Thankfully, the beefy health bar of my deranged brute is enough to clean up. I could take any of those units and they'd be better, but at this point I've kind of invested into the deranged brute. And sunken cost fallacy. That's really all there is to this one. Removal is priority. And I get Scorching Restraint, which was what I was kind of a little hoping for in the back of my head. It, like, retroactively validates my choice of deranged brute, because it makes the rage so much stronger for good early game scaling, which I really actually can't complain about. It does its job decently well by giving Sentient an extra attack. You can see it working pretty well here, but it only does last 3 turns and then all the scaling is gone. So I can only do a nice amount of damage to that particular Clipped Guardian. Again, removal is an obvious necessity here. Enough regen and enough strength that I can kind of beat down the Thoughtbinder. I can say, "Be gone, Thoughtbinder," and then move on with my life after that horrible joke. Dupe and remove is the clear choice. Get rid of some torches, and then dupe a restore for my extra draw, or not, apparently. I think I'll be able to do that one later, to be fair, so I won't blame my past self for that one. I can actually play on the first floor here, because the Rejuvenate damage and the Priory's Cloak damage make it so that I don't need to worry. I am very low on restore density here, though, which is still a problem. And part of it is just bad RNG in this particular fight. But part of it, and really most of it, is that I should have taken draw instead of energy, and that I should have purged more. Crystal Cloak is a bit scary here, as you can see, but it ends up almost dying. Which is really the way I'd prefer it. Well, really, I'd prefer it completely dying, but I do manage to achieve that with a couple torches, and then we're good to go. No pyre damage taken, despite the fact that, again, pretty close shave, and I've had a lot of those on Ring 5 so far in this run, but obviously this was the last of them. More removal was probably the choice, but considering I have 700 gold saved up, I can definitely get the purges I need, especially because I have 50 cost purges from not having purged at all in the rest of this run. So, by dumping most of my accumulated wealth into that purge node, we're good to go, with the pretty much perfect setup. Except for Scourgefell. Scourgefell is not the perfect setup. It can go okay if I'm able to clear out the Absolver, and by the power of Priory's Cloak and Deranged Brute, that is achieved, and so this fight will go perfectly fine. I can play out the ultimate penances and rejuvenate up safely. Not much else to say about this run, just because it's pressing 1 or 3 or whatever key over and over again to clear enemies. But again, the power of Priory's Cloak is evident in some of the interactions here. Not this one, but here, the extra damage is not insignificant. That 18 pop-up is all of them. One Horn's Tome could have been taken there, but didn't have to be by any means. Especially because that would have roped me into either going to Emergent of Magic, which I did, or taking draw, sketches, nope, gauge, nope. Much though I want to. So here's fight 7. I'm a little spooked because this is where I died last time, and it's Conduit Masters with the same problem as last time, which is that I lacked any backline reach. No spikes, no sweep, none of that. So I wisely play Deranged Brute up there so that he doesn't do extra strikes of damage to living armor and increases his attack in that way. But here's the dark side of Priory's Cloak, which is that doing 2 strikes of damage during Relentless is going to mess things up a little bit. Each of those extra strikes is another point of damage, which is a big deal on a boss with multi-strike. So he gets down to 84 health, and there's nothing else I can do, so I have to hope this lives. Which, because I kill the Conduit first, it just barely does. Edge Prior don't have the capacity for it, much though I do always love to see it. And breathing a really, really scared sigh, I can move on to Seraph, and Seraph is actually pretty easy here because I have 6 restores. And a backliner, which is pretty much a number that makes me confident. Deranged Brute is going to eventually get sacked into oblivion, but for the crucial early floors he will do his job, and even put a little bit of extra damage onto Seraph. We move all the way through, and the 6 restores and backliner allow me to clear everything out, and even omit a couple plays if I want to. So this is a clear world record, and the only thing that determines anything now is just how fast I can go in this fight. And I'm just mashing 1. I think Priory's Cloak slows things down a little bit, or that may just be the extinguish animations. Whatever the case, I'm still perfectly happy with the time I got. Which is about to be revealed, despite the fact that it was in the title already, so there's not much cliffhanger to be had here. And boom, 47, 39, 23. Probably a little bit off, but close enough that it's still a very clear sub 50 and a very, very clear world record. And if you don't think the all clans, just because of the verification issues, wasn't a world record, the Melting Remnant definitely is. So with that, hope you enjoyed this amazing run. If you did, please do like and subscribe. If not, comment down below with how I can improve. And either way, have a good one. This has been Cinis.